Jeff, thank you so much for giving me your time and coming on today. It's a pleasure to have you on to chat. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Great to hear. First of all, today, I'd like to go back to when you were younger and when it all started for you, and where did it all begin for you in wanting to become a referee?
Well, I don't really think I wanted to become a referee. I was a football fan. I wanted to be a footballer, but
Yeah,
a distinct lack of ability prevented that. So I sort of, I was working in a bank at the time, and it's the old joke, but that's where the original song, The Referee's a Banker, came from. And one of my customers was the secretary of the local county FA, and he sort of cajoled me into taking the referee's exam, took it, and then panicked because then they expected me to start refereeing football matches. And that started off way back when on the Harold Wilson Rec in Thornaby, where you know when you go and watch kids like 6 and 7 year olds play football and 22 footballers run round the ball. Well, as a referee, you've watched football all your life and you think you know football. But as a referee, you're tending just to chase the ball until you realise that you can't do that for 90 minutes because players kick the ball 60, 70 yards in the other direction. So it was a little bit of a rude awakening. And I went into it with no preconceived ideas of it being a career or anything like that. Did the local leagues on a Sunday. The following season made a big decision, and that was to stop going because I used to follow Borough home and away every match. And I did a local junior game at Wilton ICI the same day as the Borough were at home. And I was like driving from Acklam, sort of past the roads that were leading to Ayresome Park. And, you know, something I'd done for the previous sort of 15 years, every time the Borough played. And I'm like thinking there's something wrong here. Why aren't I going to the match? And fortunately for me, because I thought a couple of times about just stopping the car, parking up and going to the match, seeing me mates. But I went on to Wilton, refereed that game, and then got hooked. And, you know, fortunately for me, refereed the local leagues, went up through the Northern League, through the conference, which is now, you know, the National League. And after many years, finally got into the pro game. So it was, as it turned out, it was a wise decision. But having been like an avid Borough fan, it was a bit of an odd feeling to just all of a sudden stop going. You know, any football fan will know Saturday afternoon you go to the match,
yeah.
and just to stop going after a lifetime of going, it was a bit of a wrench. But as I say, fortunately for me, it was probably the right decision.
It seemed like it. Well, obviously, it worked out for you very well. What, what was your first move into the professional game after working in like the North Riding leagues and the non-leagues?
Well, you do the way refereeing progressed then and tends to in the main progress now is that you were always acting as a linesman at a higher level, one level higher than you're refereeing at. And it was a good system. So you'd be refereeing 1 week, say in my case, in the Northern League, but I was also on the Football League line. So you got that experience of being involved in the Pro League. I was very fortunate as well because I'd refereed on the Northern Intermediate League. So when I eventually got onto the Football League, a lot of the younger players, you know, I used to referee Middlesbrough Intermediates, and they had Mogger, Gary Pallister, Gary Parkinson, all the lads playing for us. And I refereed Gaza at Newcastle, and players that were only sort of 17, 18, 19-year-old. But by the time I got onto the senior level,
Yeah.
they'd gone as well. So by lining on the Northern Intermediate League and refereeing on the Northern Intermediate League, and then I was also running the line on the Central League, or I think it eventually be called the Pontins, and it was a league that I believe should be in now, rather than having all this age-related football, you know, under 18s, under 23s. reserve team football gave younger players a chance to be blooded against senior pros. It also gave me the chance. The last season before I got on the Football League Middle, I refereed Sunderland versus Newcastle and Newcastle versus Sunderland, both games that season. And, you know, there was decent crowds in. You know, I'm talking about, I think it was nearly 10,000 in for the junior derby, so to speak, the reserve derby. And that was a good grounding, not only for referees, but it was a good grounding for the players as well. So, you know, you picked up that little bit of experience so that when you eventually got to a higher level. But I think I've got to say, the northeast of England, as you well know, I love non-league football. Yeah. Still, I've gone back to supporting non-league football now. My career is long over. But people used to say when you eventually get promoted onto what is now called the National League, oh, there's some big games there, you know, you're going to be going to some tough places. And when I eventually started going to the Altrinchams and the Runcorns that were in that level below the Football League, it wasn't such a big step up for me because I'd been refereeing at Blythe, Bishop Auckland, Spennymoor, Whitby. And it's no surprise that there's so many referees that have got to the very top have come from our part of the world, because there was no tougher school refereeing than the Northern League. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's one of the reasons. Without the Northern League, I would never have had the career I had. It was an excellent grounding for referees, some top players and tough grounds to go to, always very competitive. So I think I was fortunate to be born in this part of the world, really. It gave me a benefit over those soft Southerners that weren't refereeing at Bishop Auckland versus Blythe Spartans on a Saturday afternoon.
And as you say, you still support non-league now because, as you know, because I've spoke to you before, I do a lot of things with Mask United, and yeah. I know you do things at Redcar Athletic. Is it? And I've seen you've got a few Whitby games. Have you still got a big passion for attending non-league matches?
Yeah, I have. I mean, I'm a season ticket holder at Stockton. I'm a season ticket holder at Redcar Athletic. Redcar Athletic did ask me if I would become their club ambassador. And, you know, I've been putting a lot of events on to help them raise money this season. But, you know, I went to Whitby last weekend. I go to Mask regularly. And, you know, I've been to other games throughout the Northeast, Spennymoor, when Jason Ainsley was the manager there. And value for money and everything else, I think we've seen over Christmas the attendances in non-league football. They're going through the roof because I think a lot of people are realising it's honest football, it's down to earth. Yeah. You know, you can take your kids there, you can have a pint and stand and watch the game, all the things that the professional game have stopped you doing. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of people through COVID, when they couldn't go to the pro games and they could still go to some of the non-league games, they've been and they've liked it and they've continued to go. And when you see the attendances, they're fantastic. You know, I mean, even at clubs way down the pyramid, you know, in the Northern League First Division, you know, Redcar, they're looking at 300-400 regularly as attendances. There's some of the grounds, I mean, Redcar Athletic weren't in the Northern League when I was a Northern League referee, but some of the grounds like Northallerton and places like that, I used to referee there, and you'd be lucky if there was 40 people there. And now they've got pre-match hospitality. So, you know, non-league football is really on the up, and I think it's great. You know, it's grassroots football, is honest football, great value for money, and there's a great camaraderie, you know, amongst the clubs and amongst the supporters, and you know, I hope it continues to thrive.
And I totally agree with you on that. Like with Mask, since I've started going, I've loved it, and like you said, the value for money for the quality of football you get, and I just think it's a very good league, and they're an example of like some of the crowds have been pulling in this season. Like I know there was a Stockton game on Boxing Day. There's been the cup ones against Chester and Gates, which have been brilliant crowds, which has been quite refreshing to see for non-league football, really.
Yeah, and I think once you've been, I mean, I was at Gateshead for the replay,
Mm.
and
That-
Mask took over 500 fans, where
I think it
um,
was half of the attendance, wasn't it? I
half,
think,
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
And it's great. And I think once you've been, you get hooked. And there's a lot of people, certainly over in East Cleveland, where I'll see them at Mask on a Tuesday night and Redcar on a Wednesday night. So whilst they may have an allegiance to one of the two teams, they are supporting the sort of non-league
yeah.
ethos.
Because like I know what you mean. Because like all of these, like although they might be like because you got Mask, Red Card, they like class each other as rivals, but like all the non-league teams are sort of in like the same boat, and they're all on a
Yeah,
boat together. And I totally agree with that. One thing I would like to ask you is like you who's obviously refereed in like the biggest league in the world, and you go and watch non-league a lot. Do you notice a difference in the toughness of the players? Because and I always say this to my dad and whoever I go to the mask matches with and non-league, you see a lot less players going down and not trying to claim fouls as much as you
I
do.
think I think the way to sum it up is honesty.
Yeah,
I mean, at any level, players will try to get one over on the referee, but there is more of an honesty in, and you can't call it amateur football anymore because the amount of money being paid in non-league football is quite high. But there just is more of a nice feeling about
yeah,
non-league football. Still ultra competitive. Teams want to win, and the prizes, the prize money. Yourself from the FA Cup. The amount for winning and going into another round is phenomenal. It can be the difference between clubs surviving or not surviving. But I mean, the money in professional football at the highest level is obscene. And in my day, football was a sport. I think at the highest level now, football is a business. But
yeah,
when you talk about non-league football, even though the levels of money in the game are getting more and more, it does seem more like a sport. So there's room for both, but I always think it's like building a house. If you haven't got a strong foundation, the rest of the house is going to crumble. And for those who, when they talked a couple of months ago about super leagues and everything
oh,
else, just wanting to drain all of the money out of football to
yeah,
what is now largely foreign owners, I think that really helped unite football fans. And perhaps there
like
are some
yeah,
people, if the borough's doing well, the senior club in our area, but people are going to go and people are going to follow that. But perfect example of one of the top non-league clubs in the area is South Shields.
yeah,
Sunderland have had a few years where they've been in the doldrums, and Newcastle, struggling. And all of a sudden, they're getting phenomenal gates. They've just put a stand in
yeah.
there
There's
that
the owners have put a lot of money
a
into
lot of
like
money. I mean,
they, yeah,
I say to people now, in 4 or 5 years, I'd be very, very surprised if South Shields aren't a football league club.
yeah, yeah.
And Spennymoor have made tremendous steps forward as well. So um, obviously the professional game, I still go on. Obviously, I work for Middlesbrough Football Club on match days. I'm a season ticket holder at Ibrox, so I go. I've not sort of turned my back on the pro game. I still love it, but I'm always looking at the fixtures to make sure that when I'm available, I can get to non-league football. I think I'm just football mad.
Yeah.
In effect, I like being out there. But it's different to go back when you think I started off being a fan on the terraces. Then I had fortunate enough to have a career in the professional game. And now I've gone back to roots, so to speak. I've gone back to doing what I started, watching football locally.
I now want to talk about your career in the Premier League. If I'm right, it started in 1995 and lasted 9 seasons until 2004.
Yeah.
How did it feel when you first got that move into the Premier League and you knew you were going to be refereeing in what's probably widely known as the best league in the world?
It is a massive step up, and you don't realise. I mean, the best analogy to make is when you look at a championship team, and over the last few years, perfect example, clubs like Fulham, like Norwich, and West Brom a few years ago used to be the yo-yo type team.
Yeah.
And you could be far, far too good for the Championship, get promoted from the Championship, but then the gulf in class in the Premier League means quite often that teams that go up come straight back down again. It's very much the same with refereeing. I mean, you were refereeing in the Championship, big games, big clubs. I mean, you look at clubs that are in the Championship now that regularly have over 20,000 people in, and big derby games and one thing and another. But the intensity of the Premier League, the difference in class, the speed of the game, the interest, I mean, you could perhaps make a mistake in a game in the Championship and certainly in the lower divisions, and nobody would know. Any game in the Premier League, the media involvement is so great that whatever happens goes around the world. So you do notice the step up in class. In some ways, it's easier to referee a Premier League game than it is to referee a Northern League game, because the quality of the player dictates that 9 times out of 10, the ball's going to go where they want it to go, and it is played at a great pace, but you can read play and you can sort of, as a referee, glide in behind play. What happens the lower down, you get a lot of 60, 70, 80-yard pumps up and down the field. And as a referee, Linford Christie couldn't keep up with a football kicked at 60 miles an hour or more. So sometimes once you get used to the spotlight and the glare and the publicity of the Premier League, it does become a little bit easier. But in the early days, it was almost like starting all over again. My first game, and going back to my Northern League days, my second game as a referee in the Northern League was Spennymoor versus Blythe Spartans. And at the time, I think between those two clubs that won the league for about the last something like 12, 15 years. Wow. And when I got onto the Premier League, my first game in the middle was Nottingham Forest versus Chelsea. And Nottingham Forest had the likes of Stuart Pearce playing for them. Chelsea had Mark Hughes, Ruud Gullit, and players of that quality, players that had not only won things domestically, but had won things in Europe and played in World Cups. Full houses was usually the norm in a Premier League game. So it was, to a certain extent, like starting all over again. And in your first season as a Premier League referee, you tend to referee, if you look at the league table nowadays, you might be getting a Newcastle versus a mid-table team. But not necessarily a relegation battle, but you would get lower division, mid-table division games. And then as you get your confidence, as you get established at that level, you tend to then perhaps you'd get Manchester United or Liverpool or Chelsea away from home against a lesser team. And then perhaps when a cup tie came along, if Man United were playing, a first or second division team, a championship team, you would go to that ground and experience refereeing the bigger stadiums, but in a not such a high profile game. And then as you become established, as you become experienced, then, as I was fortunate enough to experience in my final years on the league, you were getting the big derby games and the title games and the relegation battles. So, refereeing, sometimes people think, they just pull the names out of a hat and throw the referee on the pitch. That doesn't happen. They do put a lot more thought into it to try, and the best games have the best players in, so they need to have the best referees. When people pass comments like, he's been demoted to the Championship, he's not refereeing in the Premier League this week because he's rubbish. He's not rubbish. It's almost like saying a player has gone on loan to get experience at a lower level, and he stands out at that lower level. But, you know, once you get into the Premier League, there's no hiding place.
Yeah.
And it takes time for a young footballer to get that additional experience to operate at the highest level.
Yeah.
Exactly the same with the referees.
Obviously, you achieved a brilliant consecutive 9-year career in the Premier League. So I imagine, like you say, you'll have got to some big derbies eventually. One question I've got is there any in particular game that stands out in your memory as the toughest to referee?
Well, one of the games I refereed, Tottenham versus Arsenal.
North London.
I refereed it twice, but the first time I refereed it was the first time Sol Campbell had been back to White Hart Lane as an Arsenal player. And I don't think, you know, I refereed Newcastle, Sunderland, Forest Derby, Man City, Man United, Liverpool, Everton, West Brom, Wolves, and plenty of the London derbies, Portsmouth, Southampton, Millwall, West Ham. So I had a lot of the potential wars. But this particular day, I have never known hatred like it. And there's no point glossing it over by using a word anything less alarming than hatred. The vitriol that was being aimed at Sol Campbell that day was like something else. And in fairness to Sol Campbell, he was cool as cucumber, you know, he just got on with it and had an excellent game. But, you know, the animosity, which was more, there'd have been animosity in the North London derby anyhow, but that was sort of highlighted. But the thing is, if you spoke to any of your Mask United players and they said, you know, we've got a game against bottom of the league this Saturday, we beat them 6-0 earlier in the season, or we've got a top of the table clash, we've got a derby game, like you said, the Boxing Day game against Stockton and the like. The players are more up. It's just common sense. They're going to be up for the bigger games.
Because they're going to want to beat their rivals.
Yeah. It's the same from a referee. You know, when the fixtures came out, and when I was an established Premier League referee, and the game came out, and I'd got Norwich City versus Aston Villa, and you looked at the same set of fixtures, and Tottenham were playing Arsenal, Man United were playing Liverpool that weekend. That was the game you wanted. Yeah. Now, ironically, having the bigger game is potentially more problems, potentially more that can go wrong, more headlines. But, you know, every footballer, every match official, you're in it to get to the top. You're in it to win it, so to speak. And, you know, when the fixtures were coming out, I mean, I had a little bit of a record. Chelsea Leeds in my time was always, and it stemmed back from one of the cup finals in the 60s. There's always been bad blood between Chelsea and Leeds. Now, it almost became during my time on the Premier League, the lads used to joke and say, oh, Jeff's game's coming up next Saturday, because I think I refereed it 8 times at either ground. And it was always a tough game, but you thrive on that. You know, you want to be involved in the games where you know there's something at stake and where there is bad feeling. And that happens at every level. You know, there's local derbies and there's key tussles in the Northern League and the Northeast counties, the Northern Prem, whatever you go. And if you're officiating at that level, you want to you don't want an easy afternoon. You want an easy afternoon. You want a quiet afternoon, but you want to be doing the top games. And usually the top games, there's more likely to be a lot more at stake. And, you know, I do feel it brings the best out of players, but it also usually brings the best out of match officials as well.
Like you say, I can imagine anything that's got a big name written all over it. Referees, players are going to be up for it more. I can imagine that North London derby was going to be up there. I thought that would be one of your answers, but was this Spurs players having hatred towards Sol Campbell?
No.
Or was it because I remember he was getting threats, as I've heard before.
Well, it's the spectators. It's the spectators. Yeah. Quite often, you will occasionally get bad blood between players because of things that have happened in the past.
Yeah.
And as a referee, we've got people. I always laugh when people say, "Oh, the refs got it in for him. The refs, already got him in the book before they went on the pitch." Well, that isn't true. But if a referee goes onto a pitch without knowing of any history of any bad blood, then he's a little bit foolish, really. Because as a ref, you need to know where. Let's put it in players' terms. If you've got a centre forward that attacks the front post from corners and the opposition don't know about that, then they can't do anything to stop it. If a referee knows that earlier on in the season, Leeds United played Southampton and the two midfield players both got sent off and had been kicking lumps out of each other for half an hour before they got sent off, then the referee needs to know that. Because in the early stages of that game, he's got to be talking to them, getting involved with them, because if he controls that potential flashpoint, then there's a chance that hopefully he'll keep them both on the pitch and there won't be the aggro that there'd been in a previous game. So, you are aware of history. If Man United are playing Arsenal in my generation and you weren't aware that Roy Keane and Patrick Vieira had a little bit of a, relationship with each other, then there's something wrong. So that's my phone going off. How unprofessional, not turning my phone off when I'm doing a podcast.
No worries.
There'd be something wrong if you haven't done your homework, and referees most certainly needed to do that. And it made it interesting. And, I had a few games where there was history and bad blood. But, my aim as a referee always was and always would be to keep 22 players on the pitch.
Yeah.
I was quite proud of my record. I mean, at the time, Arsenal had an horrendous record for players being sent off.
Yeah.
Bad disciplinary record. I never sent an Arsenal player off during my career. And one of the proudest records I think I had, and I'm not one for looking back through all the statistics, but when I was writing my book, I had to look back at a few bits and pieces. I think I went 6 Premier League games on the bounce without a yellow card. Now, if you think about football nowadays, if you go through a 90-minute without a yellow card, that takes some doing. I used to be quite proud of that. I mean, there are some things in a game of football where if something happens, you've got to take action. But there are other things that, and perhaps it was different. I won't say easier, but it was different in my day. The refs now, you've got VAR, which will start me off swearing if you want to talk about that. But you've got VAR, you've got the referees being mic'd up. In my day, you could talk to the players. And when I say talk to them, it wasn't always nice and pleasant. If a player told me where to go, he'd get it back with interest. But players respected that and got on with that. They didn't want to be dictated to like they were a naughty little kid in the school playground or whatever. And it was easier. I think when I watch football now on the telly, I can't remember the last time I saw a referee smile. I can't remember the last time I saw obvious banter between the referee and the player. It's all deadly serious now, and the refs, we were always under pressure, but I think now with every incident being scrutinised and VAR and everything, I don't think the lads enjoy it as much as we used to. They've got wonderful salaries now. They've got wonderful perks post-career. They tend to get jobs in football. In my day, you were on a 1-year contract, and at the end of that season, if your marks weren't up to scratch or you weren't maintaining the necessary fitness levels, that was it. You were off. It was totally different. But apart from the financial aspects and all the other aspects, I think we had it a lot easier in those days because man management was the most important thing with referees. Now, if you don't show a yellow card, or a red card, it's perceived as a sign of weakness. And, you know, then you're seeing games, I think, ruined by, you know, players being sent off, where perhaps with a little bit of common sense and a little bit of man management, you know, because the fans that pay to watch football, they go to watch 22 footballers. They don't go to watch a referee shotting cards around like confetti. But I'm happy that I refereed when I refereed. I'm not so sure I'd be so happy refereeing now. But like I say, the compensations are that they are very, very well remunerated now. But, you know, I still forget the money. It's like looking at footballers. You know, my mate Bernie, when Bernie was playing for the Borough, he'd probably earn in a season what some of the Borough players now earn a week.
Yeah.
And, you know, yes, you wish you'd lived in that generation from, you know, from a financial point of view. But from an enjoyment point of view, I wouldn't change anything.
You mentioned about aggravated players and that. Is there anyone that was constantly in your ear and that would never leave you alone and was like pretty much your like worst nightmare to referee?
No, not my worst nightmare, because at the end of the day, to use that well-known footballing saying, I had always had the last resort, didn't I? I could caution him, I could send him off, you know. Yeah. So if he got to me that much, I could do something about it. I don't see football as being any different to any walk of life. There'll be people who you get on well with, there'll be people you have a bit of banter with, and there'll be people, you could be working in an office, in a factory, there'll be people you don't get particularly, you know, on with. You have to tolerate them. And there was a few footballers that fell into that category. But in the main, I used to like to have a bit of crack with the lads, a little bit of banter. And if someone give me a gobful, you know, probably the cleanest story I can tell is where a player screams at you over a decision, and a couple of minutes later, he has a shot and it goes miles wide. I just run alongside them and go, you were having a go at me. That was shite. That was terrible, that. And then they'd look at you, most of them, and fair enough, Jeff. And you could have that sort of banter.
Yeah.
You get some that you could have no crack with at all. Roy Keane being a perfect example. His personality, he didn't want to waste his time talking to a referee. He was that focused on the job, which is what he's paid for. But you couldn't have any banter with him. No crack whatsoever. And there were a few other players, some you'd find surprising, the names, you know, that you wouldn't particularly get on well with. But perhaps it tells you something about me. I got on with all the bad boys, all the, you know, Paul Ince, Alex Ray, players like that used to get stuck in, but Dennis Wise, that you could actually have a bit of banter with. And in the main, you know, I loved the involvement. I loved doing what I did. Had a great career, enjoyable, obviously made mistakes because there hasn't been a referee born that doesn't get things wrong. Perhaps our mistakes weren't as highlighted as the ones that you see today, you know, because everything is dissected. And now I'll just look at the body language of the refs with VAR, though. I mean, I can see the benefits finally now when in this country, it's getting better. It's by far from being the day I die. If a footballer made as many mistakes, if a referee made as many mistakes in a game of football as a footballer, he would be absolutely crucified, because the referee can do nothing wrong for 89 minutes and give a penalty that turns the result of the game. And the referee's had a stinking game. He was useless. He was rubbish. A player can do nothing for 89 minutes and score the winner in the last minute, and he's a hero.
Yeah, he's headlines. Yeah.
Yeah, that's never going to change. That's, you know, if you don't like that, then don't become a referee. And And, you know, the pundits are still as bad as they ever were. You know, that's the most frustrating thing when you've been a referee, is listening to some of the comments. And they're from international footballers, people that played for the country, they've been at top clubs, they've had a full career in the game, and they haven't got the clue. They haven't got a clue about the laws of the game, which, you know, if you were in any other walk of life and you didn't understand what the rules of your job were or what you're expected to do, you'd be getting the sack. But, you know, they've played, and they'll pass comments on something that's happening on the pitch, and they've shot this cheap line in, oh, referees don't understand the game, they've never played the game. But people that have played the game don't understand the laws of the game. So, you know, that's the one bugbear that you actually get from some people, and certainly when I'm swearing at the telly watching the footy. But overall, football, I mean, as you can probably tell, I love football, always have done, always will do. It creates, you know, through these difficult times we've had over the last couple of years, I think football has probably, and without being too over dramatic, it's probably saved lives, because the people, you know, were in a right rut, and, you know, financial problems or whatever, and they thought, oh, there's a match on the telly tonight, and it's give them something to look forward to. And, you know, when we're whinging about an offside decision or whinging about something else, you want to look at the greater picture, and the fact that, you know, over the last 2 years, especially when we were in lockdown, I've done many podcasts like this, and people love talking about football. And, you know, we share opinions, and just because I was a ref doesn't mean everything that I say is right. Doesn't mean to say I'm right and you're wrong, but it gives you a platform.
I think there was a bit of a freeze there.
Yeah, I think you froze on me.
Yeah, I think you're doing it for me and I'm doing it for you, but I think we're getting on okay. But yeah, I totally agree, and I think that's very important, because I think football has been massive for people, like you say, in the last 2 years when there's been lockdowns, and it's just gives people an element to look forward to.
Exactly.
Even
I mean, you know yourself when
get to the games, like they could just watch it on the TV.
Well, even when, I mean, I know it was a little bit surreal watching games with no fans in, and during the lockdown at the back of last season, I was actually, I don't know whether I was fortunate enough, but I was able to go to Middlesbrough's home games because I was doing some Zoom conferences for the fans, sat in an empty stadium, and it just wasn't the same. But at least there was some football on, and, you know, I think having watched every box set available on Netflix for the first 3 months, then it was just lovely to have some football to go to. And as I said earlier, I think that's where non-league football, you know, you could still go limited crowds to some of the non-league games. And it was that sense of being out in the fresh air and actually watching and being at a football match. It didn't really matter whether it was Redcar Whitby or whether it was the Riverside or St James's Park or wherever. The fact that you could get out to a game of football, it was brilliant. And let's hope we don't have those days again.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we just want to continue attending matches now. Finally, Jeff, it's been a pleasure to chat, but the one big topic I want to ask you before, because I know this one's going to be a big discussion, VAR. What are your, as an ex-referee from the 90s, early 2000s, who never had anything like that, how do you think you would referee with it now, and what are your opinions on it?
Well, I'm glad that I didn't have it in my day.
Yeah.
As I said earlier, referees will make mistakes. I think the one thing that video technology has educated football fans out there, you used to get statements like everyone in the ground could see that. And now perhaps the people that made those statements realize how foolish they were. Because, you know, when you talk about, say, goal line technology, and people are saying everyone on the ground could see that was over the line. And now we're seeing millimeters with a ball driven in at 80, 90 mile an hour, hitting the underside of the crossbar, bouncing down and out. And somebody sat in row 1 at the far end of the ground was telling everyone that you could tell it was over the line and it was 100 yards away. And I used to just laugh at them, thinking, you're an idiot. You've never been on a football pitch in your life. You don't understand. So there are certain aspects, and goal line technology is phenomenal. It should be there at every level where it's physically affordable. I always had fears about the technology, which is now called VAR. I think the football authorities in this country made an absolute balls up of it. In the first season, it was the blind leading the blind. I felt very sorry for the referees because they were more or less being told what they had to do. You know, they were changing the interpretation of a handball. They were changing the interpretation of this, that, and the other. Yeah. And you've got experienced referees, and I could see from the body language on the pitch, they're just like shaking their heads, thinking, "What the in hell is going on here?" And you know, again, I think the leadership from the FA. We saw World Cups and European games and Euros, etc., where they went smoothly. But no, the FA and the Premier League here, you had to do it their way. And, you know, having a referee out in the middle that's got to carry the can. And they were dissuading him from going across to the screen. Last season was better. This season, I think we've gone back into some of our previous problems, you know, and the credibility of the referee is being called into question more so now with a system that was there supposedly to help them. So it doesn't really matter what I think. It doesn't matter what I say. The fact is, it's here to stay, and hopefully you'll get the uniformity, and it will work to everyone's advantage. The one thing, and this is just a personal view, that I disagree with is the interpretation of offside. Football is about goals. It's about, the centre-half won't agree with me for saying that, but it's about entertainment. It's about excitement. From the fans' point of view, it's about the elation of your team scoring a goal. From the players' point of view, even more so. You've trained all week long. You've scored a goal. You want to celebrate that goal, and now we've got this pregnant pause that sometimes can go on for anything up to a couple of minutes, while they dissect, you know, millimeters.
Like people have been offside by a stud, which is pathetic.
I mean, for me, and my opinion is, we should go back to how it used to be when I started refereeing, and that was, there was supposed to be daylight between the attacker and the defender. Now, I know what people say is, well, if you're a millimetre offside because of the front of your body, at the back of your body, if I'm running forward past you, you're the defender, and my leg is a millimetre behind the front of your toe, so you're saying, well, there isn't daylight, so that goal would be ruled out. So, you know, I suppose when they say it's definitive, if part of your body's offside, it's offside, let's get on with it. I can understand it, maybe that's the way it's going to be, but I don't agree with it. We've seen some wonder goals chalked off for, as you say, a stud's width. You know, if you cut your toenails on the morning, you might have been onside. I know that's not strictly true, but it gets the point across. I disagree with that, because I thought VAR was there and going to be brought in to the things that a referee couldn't see. When a referee had been conned by a player who looks like he's got fouled but has thrown himself down at the last second, things like that, where nobody's really crucifying or blaming the referee, but they are sort of there to help get the referee out of a hole and get the decisions right. I think we've gone too far, in my personal opinion. You know, we're dissecting wonderful goals. We're taking some of the fun out of the game.
Taking the celebrations away.
Yeah, the first game I went to, I was speaking in the hospitality lounges at Everton West Ham, maybe about 3 seasons or so ago now. And it was the first game, because obviously watching non-league football, watching the Borough, watching Rangers in Scotland, there wasn't any VAR. And the first game I ever went to was this Everton West Ham game. And Everton have scored after about half an hour. And, you know, the initial reaction is that everyone goes up, the players go up. Yeah. But there was like this, as I call it, a pregnant pause where there's like a look to the referee, a look to the screen, a look round, and then is it being given? And then 30 seconds later, or however later, the initial sort of euphoric reception to scoring a goal, it's almost like an afterthought, and like it isn't the same. And on the terraces and in the seats and stands, it's the same with the fans. Wasn't it? And I always used to say, football, I can come with you at the weekend and Masker playing. We could sit next to each other, watch the game of football, and after the game, we go in the bar, and you can turn around and say, I thought that one was offside, Jeff, and I can go, well, I didn't, and blah, blah. And we'd talk, I'd listen to your point of view. But we're not going to fall out, we're not going to fight, but we can have a debate about, was it a penalty, wasn't it a penalty?
In respect of opinions,
Yeah. If you take all those talking points out of football, then the game does become like a little bit, and no disrespect to people who play it, they're far more intelligent than me. People who play chess, you know, it's not a game of chess. It's not black and white. There is grey areas, and you need that to keep the interest, to spark the enthusiasm.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you imagine a game that is totally dissected, and the good thing about VAR at the moment is that it is creating aggro and discussions, because people are now not saying it was offside, it wasn't offside. They're saying VAR got that wrong, VAR got that right, you know, and so they've not took away the talking point. But if it got finalised that everything was succinct to a T, everything, no argument. So we go into the bar after the game. There's nothing to talk about, is there? You know, the game's over and done. So it's here to stay. It does need fine tuning. It's certainly in this country. It does need improving. Am I a fan? Overall, no. And all I can say is I'm glad it wasn't in my day, because I fail to understand how a referee in charge of the game of football isn't in charge of some of the major decisions, because
like what's actual handball and what
and how do I sell sending you off when I personally didn't think it was a sending off, but someone's told me in my ear, I've got to send you off. Now, at least now they're letting you go across to the screen, so the referee does have the final decision. But I can't recall many times, you know for a fact, when the referee goes across to look at the screen, the goal's going to be chalked off, the penalty's going to be chalked off. I don't think a referee dare go across and sort of almost go against his colleague who's had the benefit of umpteen slow motion replays and different angles. So then you've got a referee coming back on, feeling a bit of a prat, having to send a player off, having to give a major decision, because 5 minutes later, I know how players' minds work. When the referee makes a decision, the player's going to be in his ear going, are you sure, ref, because you got the last one wrong? Are you going to check that one out? And I just find it hard as a professional doing your job where you're dependent on other people away from the park. But that's probably why it's as well I'm not refereeing anymore. I did what I had to do in my day, and my time is long gone, and now I can just be a football fan. Unfortunately, though, I can't be a football fan. I can be a football fan with the colours I wear and the team I shout for, but because on my CV I used to be a referee, then whether I'm sat at Mask, Redcar, Stockton, Ibrox, the Riverside, any bloody refereeing decision that somebody isn't happy with, somebody's going to turn to me, what do you think about that? You're all the same, you, and I still get grief. I last refereed in 2004, where there's a lot of people going to games now weren't even born in 2004. And I still get the blame, or I still get tarred with the same brush. And I'm like going, hey, I'm the same as you, mate. I'm a fan. I'm watching the game. I wanted it to be a penalty.
I've done my time.
I've done my time. But the one thing you'll learn is that, you know, when you murder someone, you go to jail, but then you get let out. Once you've been a referee, you've always been a referee.
Yeah.
That's a life sentence, and I mean life sentence.
Jeff, I've thoroughly enjoyed this chat. You've been a pleasure to chat to. I've thoroughly enjoyed every minute of it. One last thing, I imagine, like myself, you'll definitely be down at the Riverside this Saturday.
I'm working, so I'll definitely be there.
Yeah, middle for Reading. What's your score prediction?
Oh, 7-0. No, I've been out with Bernie today. We go walking every Thursday, and we're talking about it. And I said to him, Fulham won 7-0 away the other night. And he said, yeah. I said, it's not the first time they've won 7-0 away from home this season in the Championship. I said, who was the last team before Reading that they won 7-0 at? He thought for a while, and other people have asked this question. They've come up with, you know, they've looked at the teams at the bottom of the league and come out with all these names. Bernie actually got it. It was Blackburn Rovers.
Yeah.
And they were calling for Mogger's head. And look where Blackburn Rovers are in the league table now.
Second or third now, aren't they?
They're right there.
Yeah,
and
like,
that is my perfect way of summing up the Championship.
It's crazy.
If you're a gambling man,
yeah,
don't look at the Championship. So, yes, it would be easy to say Borough have won, you know, however many it is on the bounce now, about 6 on the bounce, unbeaten in 7 or something like that. Reading have just lost 7-0 at home. This is nailed on. We're going to batter them. But football don't work that way. I'd love to think, especially with a new, at least one new signing starting on Saturday, and he's going to be exciting to watch. I would like to think and hope that we will win, but not only have I been watching football in the Championship for a long time, more importantly, I've been watching Borough now for over half a century, and I can tell you, you don't take anything for granted with the Borough. But I'm just hoping for everyone that wants to go to Old Trafford, that isn't the next game. The next game is Reading at home.
It's a league.
This is the one, you know. Yeah, I mean, Man United, we're not going to win the FA Cup. Man United possibly are certainly beatable at the moment, but we're not going to win the FA Cup no matter.
We do have a chance of getting promoted.
We've got a chance of getting into the playoffs, definitely.
Yeah.
In the Championship. So I'd like to think we're going to win, and I'll be there because it's. I'm hosting in the Fenton Suite on Saturday before and after the game, and I'll be as happy as Larry. But yes, I'd love to say we're going to win 7-0, but I'll take a dodgy 89th minute win if it means we get the 3 points. And hopefully, because the other thing, and I might sound a bit controversial, if we do win 7-0, I will jump in the air, but I will not jump as high as when Steve Gibson made the wonderful decision to get rid of Warnock and bring in Chris Wilder.
Yeah.
Because under Warnock, despite the fact he was brilliant at getting the press and the supporters listening to his every word, and wonderful at, you know, playing the media, playing the fans. It was a great move for me, a sensible move to get rid of him at that time. if we don't get promotion or don't get in the playoffs this year, we'll be 6 months nearer a good bash at it next year under Chris Wilder. The fans are starting to realise it now, because these players that were totally inconsistent under Warnock are now
they're playing
for the club, playing for Chris Wilder, and he's bringing quality players in as well. So the place is a lot rosier. But like I say, for everyone that wants to go to Man United and have the glory of the big cup tie at the big club, it would be lovely if we could see, 24, 25,000 there on. I don't think we'll quite get that, but they should do, because they deserve it on previous recent performances. Let's hope we get a good crowd, and a victory of any description will do me.
That would be the same for me. Jeff, thank you for your time.
Not a problem, my pleasure. And good luck to Mask United. I see they've made a couple of signings this week. Professionals, both with a former Middlesbrough part in their early development, Mondal and Jason Kennedy. And it's exciting up to the end of the season. And let's hope Butters centre forward can score as regularly as Adam Boyes does.
Yeah,